It's my sincere pleasure to welcome once again the show's first triple threat. Rita Robison, a world-renowned consumer advocate and journalist, is an expert on product safety. She's talked about child products and baby products, and today we're chatting about chemicals that get into the things that our kids use every day. If you haven't yet, please hit like and subscribe. You'd be surprised how much that helps. While you're at it, tell your friends, find us on Instagram and Facebook, even back us on Patreon, where you can get early access and other goodies for just a few bucks a month. Thanks for being here today. Now let's get to work. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Safest Family on the Block. I'm your host, Jason, and joining me today for her third full interview and fifth appearance on the show, the one and only Rita R. Robison, consumer journalist and consumer advocate of more than 20 years. You may have seen her before talking about some of the larger issues with consumer safety as it pertains to parents and kids, and now she's coming on to talk to a subtler but no less dangerous topic, which is the stuff that those things in our home are made of. Rita, thank you so much for coming on the show again today.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity, Jason. I've been writing about chemicals in food and consumer products for years. And in my writing, I rely on information from consumer and environmental groups. So the thing I want parents to know is just because it's on the market, it doesn't mean that it's safe. And tumors are the third cause of death in kids, and that's following automobile accidents and gun violence. So it's really something that parents need to be aware of. So chemicals, about 6% of the cancers are caused by chemicals, and that's just an estimate. The number could actually be higher.
And we're not talking about chemicals in a lab or anything like that. We're talking about chemicals that are present in, for example, plywood, that are outgassing into your kid's playroom, or chemicals found in pesticides or food additives, right?
Right, and we have a whole section on plastics. So, that might not, parents may have heard of BPA because that's been in the news, but, there are other things that parents need to be concerned about. So cancers are also rising in adolescents and young adults, up substantially, 30% between 1973 and 2015. And the kinds of cancers are thyroid cancers, melanoma, and non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. And some researchers say that there's a link between obesity and cancer. And they say that might be why the rates are rising among teens and young adults.
Okay, and this is the frequency with which these cancers are occurring, or the frequency as compared to other things?
Well, for these kinds of cancer, the rates are going up.
Okay.
So, and this might be news to parents because we read articles that cancer rates are going down. And the reason cancer rates are going down is because people are quitting smoking. So, that's good, but it doesn't give parents this information that cancer rates are growing among kids and teens and young adults.
That puts me in mind, this was back in the mid-90s. It was after that initial major drop in crime rates, but there was a disproportionate drop in murder rates across almost every metropolitan area, almost all at once. And a lot of people were trying to figure out why and what happened. And then somebody noticed that the assault rates had risen about the same amount that the murder rates dropped. And then they found out that there were a couple of major advances in surgery that had happened around there. So it wasn't that there was less crime, it was just that more people were surviving the violent crime. And that's the way that some not related thing can impact the statistic. Just like, as you say, we see cancer rates going down because we're not smoking, but these other cancer rates are going up. So we need
that
to
doesn't tell you what's happening to kids. And
Exactly.
so
Exactly.
one group that I wasn't aware of till recently is the American Academy of Pediatrics. And, you know, they're weighing in on this topic. So and when we get to plastics, they have some new recommendations that are really interesting. So let's start with pesticides.
Yeah.
This is an example of false safety. You go into the home and garden store and see the pretty boxes with flowers and a nice looking lawn, and you think, oh, that's what I need. But parents should be aware that pesticides are really dangerous, and the federal government is way behind in its review. And then the Trump administration came along and it delayed the review even further. So there's intense pressure from the agrochemical industry to keep using these pesticides, and they spend lots of money on lobbying the federal government. So people may have heard of Roundup because that's in the news. And what happened there is that Bayer, which bought Monsanto, lost 3 lawsuits recently from landscapers, you know, who've been working with Roundup for years. So that's been in the news. And so Bayer announced that it would set aside $15.5 billion to pay, you know, claims that are coming. And then it announced that it's not going to sell Roundup and other herbicides with glyphosate to US customers by 2023. So there's been some progress in that area. And then some other good news is about chlorpyrifos. I don't know if you've heard of that, but it's gotten attention even from some of the stars because it causes brain damage. So the good news there is it's been banned after the end of this year, but it can still be used to grow cotton and on golf courses.
So that's an interesting thing that you bring up, that when I think of pesticides, at least, I think about the reason I wash my fruit when I get it home. But you just mentioned cotton. And so those pesticides used in cotton, can that get into my kids' clothes and potentially impact them?
Well, I don't know, Jason. Good question. We're going to talk about pesticides in food. So, you know, there's a lot, you know, that can be done there, but you know, you can buy organic cotton clothes.
Yeah.
So, you know, parents would need to research. You know, I haven't researched that, so I don't know, but parents could look into that because, you know, there's all kinds, it's very easy to do research these days since we have the handy dandy internet.
If there's a viewer who happens to know, please do leave the answer in the comments. We'd love to see it.
Okay, and so the recommendation is don't use pesticides in your yard. Your kids and your pets will have higher rates of cancer, studies show, so just don't use pesticides. And childhood exposure has been linked to organ damage, attention and learning problems, and asthma. And also pregnancy exposure could lead to birth defects, low birth weight, and fetal death. So the pretty boxes in the home and garden store are one thing, but pesticides are also found in food, rodent control products, pet products, and insect repellents. So one thing I found out, I didn't think that you could use DEET on kids, but the environmental working group says that you can use it, but no more than 10%. So only a low dose of DEET.
Okay. You know, I do want to mention here that if you are somebody who keeps a garden and has been using pesticides or are experiencing pest problems and are thinking about pesticides, and the same goes for a lawn, is that there's a whole community that use natural biological pesticides, for example, ladybugs and praying mantises. And there's a couple of other insects that you can buy a batch of and put in your garden, and they'll live there happily eating all the pests, and they won't give your kids cancer, and they're cool. I mean, I don't know a kid on the planet who wouldn't love to go out to the garden and do a little weeding and then hang out with a praying mantis for a few minutes.
Yeah. Well, it's things that parents can research and they can do. And another thing parents can do is they can work with their schools and local governments to get, and there are groups working on this now because the dangers of pesticides are recognized. So these groups are working on less toxic pesticide use around schools and in parks. Mm-hmm. So it is getting some attention. And my dad was a farmer, and he died of non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. And there's a link between, he died at age 80. He was the youngest in his family, and we expected him to live into his 90s. And at the time, I didn't know there was a link between pesticides and non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, but I was listening to National Public Radio, and they had a story on about farm worker children. And they'd done a study and found that farm worker children have higher rates of non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. And that's because they're out in the fields with their parents, either because they're working or because, they're toddlers. And that's the kind of, they're there for childcare.
Wow. And if we're not doing gardening, we also need to be vigilant of this about the food that we buy at the grocery store.
Yeah, so every year the Environmental Working Group provides helpful information to consumers. The U.S. Department of Agriculture records how much pesticide residue is on food, but that's not something that you and I would know about, because it's information there in the statistics. So they do a good job. They every year they develop a list of the Dirty Dozen and the Clean 15. And so the recommendation is for the clean, the recommendation is eat organic fruits and vegetables. But if you can't afford that, then for the Clean 15, you can get those non-organically. And for the Dirty Dozen, you should buy those organically.
And those you gave us a list of those 12, the Dirty Dozen. These are the ones that have the most residue, the most pesticide residue left over when it gets to the grocery store. And that's strawberries, spinach, kale, collards, mustard greens, all one entry for that one. Nectarines, apples, grapes, cherries, peaches, pears, bell and hot peppers, celery, and tomatoes. Now, is that a matter of something about the texture of the fruit or the vegetable that makes the pesticide stick more, or is it a matter of the kind of pesticide used for that fruit, or?
Well, that's part of it. That's part of it, and it's also what the industry likes to use, because I grew up in Central Washington in apple country, and my parents used DDT, and my mom, after DDT was banned, she talked about, well, I would go out and plant the garden, and I'd dig a trench and put the DDT in, and I'd put the radish seeds in. So, it has to do with what the industry likes to use, and also, the composition, because, the things with the thicker skins, and also, things that you peel, the pesticide residue comes off.
That makes sense. Now, for those of us who can't necessarily afford organic versions of the foods on the Dirty Dozen list, but we're not going to live without some cherries from time to time, is washing them sufficient? or is it just one of those things where it's better than not washing them, but still?
Oh,
not great?
no. You need to scrub your fruits and vegetables
Okay.
with a brush because take a cantaloupe, for example. You know, if you don't scrub it, then there might be some pesticide residue on the outside. Then you cut it with a knife, and then the knife takes the pesticides down into the cantaloupe that you're going to serve. So, you know, one thing that I'm learning all the time, even at my age, Jason, and the recommendation recently is put your fruits and vegetables in the refrigerator without washing them. And that is because if there's some sort of pathogen on it, then the water spreads it around. So, of course, if you bring it in from the garden, you got to brush the dirt off. But and then wash it right before you serve it or cook it.
Oh, okay. And do we need soap for that, or is a rinse
Oh,
sufficient?
no, not soap.
Okay, just rinse it off and scrub it with a brush, and that'll dislodge at least some of the pesticide residue.
Yeah, and don't and I dated a guy once who would say to me, "Don't use that on the vegetables and the fruits after you've used it on the dishes." And I would just go, "Oh, brother." He was right. You've got to have a separate brush for your fruits and vegetables.
Okay. And you can get a good fruit. They even make special fruit brushes now, and you can get them for under $10
Yeah,
at your local kitchen supply store or off of Amazon.
right. Okay, the next category is alcohol. I didn't.
I suspect very strongly you're going to give me news I don't want to hear.
Yes. Well, this is interesting, you know, Jason, because I'm writing blogs and collecting all this consumer information. And here this article appears one day in my inbox that alcohol is a carcinogen. So I wrote about that and was surprised. Then later I got another one that said the recommendation is two glasses of alcohol per day for men, one for women, to reduce cancer risks. And the latest information is for women, you know, one glass a day is can increase your rate of breast cancer. So it's really something that somebody should, or that people should be aware of. And recently, more information in my inbox that 50% of people in the US do not know that alcohol is linked to cancer. The consumer groups have worked hard to try to get labeling for alcohol for the, you know, on the bottle or the can. And so far the industry has been able to, you know, squash that. So it's estimated that alcohol accounts for about 6% of all cancers and 4% of all deaths in the United States. So it's something that people should be aware of.
And of course, we get, like as you say, we get conflicting messages here and there in the other place, and especially because of the gap between science and science journalism, where a study will come out and the people who do that study will say, okay, well, this is what we think, this is what the numbers suggest, and then a science journalist will put some headline about, you should drink 3 bottles of wine a week to save yourself from prostate cancer, or something silly like that, wildly extrapolating out of the data. But it's on us to pay attention to the research and find out what the smartest minds are thinking right now and try to keep up with it.
Oh yeah, there was a study that came out probably 5 years ago that red wine would help reduce heart disease. And the consumer people said,
I remember that one.
the consumer people said, if you're a senior citizen and you don't drink alcohol now, do
Don't start.
not drink red wine for this tiny, tiny bit of help that you may or may not get. So resveratrol is the ingredient that they think has this positive effect. And they said, take that supplement.
Mhm. Absolutely. Well, that's bad news for some of us, myself included, that we need to drink less, but I don't think that's anything that any of us didn't already kind of know.
Oh yeah, and I didn't mention the
Yeah.
kinds of cancer.
Mm.
They're mouth, throat, voice box, esophagus, liver, colon, and rectum, and breast cancer. So
Oh, wow.
it's really something that people, need to look into.
Yeah.
So the recommendation is to reduce your alcohol consumption or don't drink at all. I used to drink a bottle of wine a week, and now I have 3 glasses. And I probably shouldn't, but hey, it's a pandemic.
Yeah, exactly, right.
So the next category is cosmetics. And in the US, cosmetics are largely unregulated. There have been few changes in the laws since 1938. And the FDA lacks the power and resources to review them before they go on the market. So a lot of times it's a whack-a-mole. Something comes up and work is done to try to ban that chemical. So, and what parents may not know is that it's legal for companies to use ingredients linked to cancer, endocrine disruption, and reproductive harm. So, and if it says natural, it doesn't mean it's safe. So
plutonium is natural.
What?
Plutonium is natural. Arsenic is natural.
Yes, that's what we're talking about. So one big factor is fragrances. A lot of these products say they have fragrance in them, and fragrances are trade secrets. So it doesn't have to say on the label what's in the product. It can just say fragrance. So I was shocked to find out in the early 90s, when I started having some respiratory problems, that according to an EPA study, most fragrances contain toxins such as benzene and toluene. I thought fragrances were made out of rose petals and flowers. So that's something that parents need to look for. And some of the problems linked to fragrance are cancer, birth defects, hormone disruption, and other health problems, according to the Breast Cancer Prevention Partners. Now, they have a really good website that people should check out, because a lot of new information is available, and they list what's dangerous in cleaning products in cosmetics.
Okay. Now, as a general rule of thumb, I mean, ideally we go look up everything we can about any new cosmetic or fragrance that we're thinking about using, but not everybody has the time. I've heard from a couple of people I trust that cosmetics are a lot like shoes, where it's the one thing that you want to go ahead and spend the real money on. Is there a reasonable correlation with, for example, never put on makeup you bought at the dollar store? That's going to have antifreeze in it or something. But if you're going to Sephora or one of those other high-end shops where makeup is a little pricey, are you more likely to be safer, or are those just as likely to have nasty stuff in them?
The answer to your question is no. The more expensive stuff isn't safer.
Okay.
So the good news is that the Environmental Working Group has a database on cosmetics and personal care products. So you can look it up. So you should just take your personal care products and your cosmetics and put them in a row and see what's in there. So
I think you just won an argument I have with my wife, a friendly argument I have with my wife. I have my brand of deodorant, I have my brand of shampoo, I have my brand of conditioner, I have my Ivory soap that I like to use, and I'm not going to go experiment with other things. I'm happy with them. I'm set in my ways. She likes to experiment and buy new brands all the time. But my way, I can look it up one time and be done with it.
yeah, and so the recommendation is if you don't want to change your beauty routine all at once, take one product at a time. That's a recommendation from the Breast Cancer Prevention Partners.
Okay, so choose, for example, your soap 1 week, and then a couple weeks later, look at your shampoo, and then a couple weeks later, look at your eyeliner, etc., until you've done a full refit over the course of a year.
Yeah,
or so.
well, I wouldn't say a couple weeks.
Okay.
I would say a few days.
Oh, okay. Okay, a tighter timeline.
Yes. So in its database, the Environmental Working Group has 70,000 personal care products, and they also have a database on sunscreens.
Okay.
And this is particularly important, if you have teenagers, because one study showed that when teenagers stopped using some of these questionable products, that the levels in their bodies dropped substantially. So it is a change that that can be helpful. So I'd also like to mention hair dyes, because kids are using it these days with all different kinds of colors. So I read one article by a reporter, and she talked about her 7-year-old son wanted colored hair like the kid at the bus stop. So she talked about wearing gloves, doing it so that it didn't touch the roots, separating out the hair. So this is something that parents, if you've got teens who are doing this, there's a link between dark pigment hair dyes and non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. So if you got kids who are using permanent hair dyes, you need to work with them to make sure they're doing it correctly. And also
there are a lot of just plant-based hair dyes you can use, organic hair dyes that A, don't have that issue, and B, they come out a lot quicker. So if your kid opts for purple hair and then changes their mind, they get to be done having purple hair much more rapidly than if they use the chemical dyes.
Yeah, and some studies show there's a link between hair dyes and non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. Okay, cleaning products. The recommendation is don't use toxic products to clean your house. They can irritate the eyes, throat, and cause headaches and other health problems, including cancer. So the recommendation is to use plain water, vinegar, baking soda, and Castile soap.
And those basic ingredients. There's a number of companies out now. Many of them are subscription model that will provide you with those cleaners with just those basic ingredients that are known to be safe. And you can also, for almost any cleaning need, you can go to any of 1,000 homesteading websites and get the recipe for how to use baking soda and vinegar to make something to clean off your car battery or whatever. So the options here are very, very, very wide to stay safe. And it's not even less convenient than buying the bad stuff.
Well, and the thing is, it's very hard to find out what's in the product because they're not, they're not required to be labeled.
No.
All some companies voluntarily put the information on the label, but they are required to have categories: poison, danger, caution, and warning. So, you want to avoid anything that says poison, danger, or caution, because those are going to be harmful.
Yeah.
So some of the chemical cleaners are linked to cancer, and one is formaldehyde and the other is dioxin.
Okay.
So it's something that parents need to research. And again, the Environmental Working Group has a database, so line your stuff up and check it out. Oh, and also in this category are detergents and dishwashing liquids. So you're going to be surprised when you look in the database and see what's in some of the popular detergents that are sold.
Absolutely. And this isn't only just for our own families, but I actually recently completed a white paper for my day job on the impact of cleaner residue in our runoff out of our houses. Because you rinse the dishes, or you wash the washcloth, or the dishwasher or the washing machine drain, and that goes into the sewage system, that goes through the water treatment plant if you're lucky, and it goes directly into a local water reservoir if you're not lucky. And even with our best efforts, that's creating a substantial increase of toxins in our drinking water.
Oh yeah.
And so
it
goes beyond just us.
Yeah. And these fragrances that are advertised to use in your house and to use on your clothes, that are widely advertised on TV, don't use those. You don't want to use those air fresheners. You don't want to put those chemicals in your clothes. And again, they're widely advertised on TV, and people think because they're on the market, they're safe. But, check them out. And also there's a new thing from the Silent Spring Institute. It does a lot of good research, and they have a free app called Detox Me, and you can use it in the store. Just scan the barcode and it'll give you information on whether or not there are toxins in the product.
And again, this one, at this point, the popularity and the willingness of people to pay a little extra for cleaners that are free of toxins has reached a point that there are plenty of brands that make good toxin-free cleaners. So it's not even inconvenient to make the switch.
Right. And I've used non-toxic laundry detergent for years. It works great.
Yeah.
And it doesn't smell terrible. And of course, I don't use dryer sheets and that kind of stuff, because they've got fragrance, and you can just get along without those products.
Yeah.
So the next category is non-stick cookware. The recommendation is to replace your non-stick cookware. Use cast iron or stainless steel. We've all heard of Teflon, and that's no longer used, but the chemicals as a substitute, they are probably just as harmful. So,
and if you go into a professional kitchen, you never find nonstick cookware. You find cast iron, you find stainless steel, you find alloys, sometimes with the copper cladding on the bottom, but you don't find nonstick stuff anywhere where professional cooks work.
Yeah, and it's easy to relearn how to grease and lightly grease your cookware. So
and you know what, on the subject of natural cleaners, if you do have to get in there and scrub something you burned, get yourself a washcloth and about a tablespoon of salt, and that'll grind anything off of there, and then the salt will kill any bacteria. So you can use an all natural cleaner on these very easily.
Right, and these chemicals, perfluorochemicals, are quite pervasive and persistent in the environment, and 99% of Americans have these chemicals in their body. And exposure has been linked to decreased sperm quality, low birth weight, kidney disease, thyroid disease, and high cholesterol. And again, the Environmental Working Group has information. They have a database on endocrine disruptors.
Wow, so that's pretty simple. Just it's not hard, it's not expensive to go ahead and get the good stuff. It's what the pros use.
Yeah. Okay, the next category is quite complicated: plastics. So the Food and Drug Administration relies on manufacturers to determine the safety of these chemicals. One researcher estimated there's probably 2,000 different chemicals used in plastics, and another researcher said, oh no, it's more like 4,000. And little is known about a lot of these. So people have probably heard of BPA, because that's what it had been widely used, and it's linked to breast and other cancers, reproductive problems, obesity, early puberty, and heart disease. So it's been banned in baby bottles and sippy cups. In other products, look for number 3 and number 7, the little recycling code. It's more likely that they're to be made from BPA. So you may feel safer when it says BPA free, but what's happening is that BPA is being replaced by BPS and BPF, and there are concerns that these plastics have similar problems as BPA.
So we're talking especially about plastics for food storage, whether that's in the packaging that you buy at the store, or what you put your leftovers in, or what you freeze your freeze anything in, right?
Oh, and what your water bottle is made out of.
Yeah.
So you want to get a metal water bottle, a reusable
metal water bottle, and glass food storage. I've been going to understand, or the better. It's a little pricier, but also because it is a little pricier, a little heavier, you're less likely to lose it when you pack a lunch. So it kind of works out in the end.
So, and food storage is one of the places where parents can make a lot of difference, because since the early 90s, I've been storing my food in canning jars, and they work really well. The lids fit, you only get 2 sizes, regular and wide mouth, and you don't have that drawer full of plastic containers and lids, and you spend 10 minutes looking for the proper lid to go with the with the container. So
really good idea. I never thought of that before. That's a really good idea. Just getting another flat of your canning jars.
Yeah,
that'll store most food.
Yeah, and they're available this time of year. I just got another set of 12 wide mouth jars. It was like, oh boy. So anyway, so receipts, thermal receipts. I'm glad we were delayed, because I learned more about thermal receipts. I thought this problem had been solved. But it's still something that people need to look out for. You can tell it's a thermal receipt if you scratch it and you see a dark color. So these receipts contain BPA. The recommendation is put an envelope in your purse or your pocket, and then put the receipt into the envelope. You don't want to put it next to your money, because the chemicals will brush off the receipt onto the money. And like I said, I thought this, I heard about this a couple of years ago. I thought the problem had been solved. But again, if they replace the BPA with BPS or BPF, then it's still a problem. Of course, I'm a consumer and financial journalist. I want you to keep your receipts. And
but also, honestly, you can just use this and take a picture of it.
oh, that's a good idea. I hadn't thought of that.
And there's a number of apps that will automatically put that into whatever bookkeeping software you're using anyway.
Yeah. Yeah. And some people ask you, do you want a paper receipt or an email receipt? So then ask for the email receipt. And like I said, I thought this problem had been solved.
And as a bonus, you don't keep accidentally throwing away the email receipt or the photo receipt like I do so often with my paper receipts.
Yeah, well, it comes in handy, every now and then to have saved a receipt.
Yeah.
So for the recycling codes, look for numbers 3 and 7. They're more likely to have BPA.
Okay.
So what to do about plastics? We already discussed the storage containers. Another thing is to avoid heat. So we've all learned that we put the plastic in the top drawer or whatever you call it of the dishwasher.
Yeah.
But the recommendation now, which comes from the American Academy of Pediatrics, is to wash your plastics by hand, especially plastics for one-time use, like you get when you have takeout food. And the problem there is the heat deteriorates the plastic. So washing it by hand, the deterioration is less. And when plastic deteriorates, then it leaches out into the food. And we've all been trained not to use plastic in the microwave. And that's because the chemicals leach out into the food.
Excellent. No, that makes sense.
Another new recommendation is don't store fatty foods in plastic because the chemicals used, some of those 2,000 or 4,000 chemicals,
fats are more soluble to chemical than proteins and carbohydrates. As I understand it.
That's it,
so
exactly.
Would be more likely to
to
leach into your food.
Yeah. So check the numbers, the recycling numbers. Code 3 is likely to contain phthalates, 6 styrene, and 7 bisphenols. And sometimes you see bio-based or greenware, and sometimes you see number 7 in PLA. So that means plant-based.
Okay.
So
even if it says that it's safe or BPA free, we need to check into we need to check into its chemical composition a little bit more to make sure.
Yeah. Yes. Okay. So for sandwiches, use parchment paper, wax paper bags, or wax cloth. Now, I did not know what wax cloth was until I was doing research for this podcast. So it's beeswax or some other wax put on cloth, and it's a little bit tacky. It comes in sheets like this. It's a little bit tacky. You can put your sandwich in it, and
it'll stick to itself.
Tacky, it'll stick to itself.
Interesting. Okay.
So it's new, and the reason it's been developed is because, as we know, plastics never deteriorate. So this lasts for about a year, and you don't use hot water because it would melt the wax. You use cool water, and it lasts about a year, and then you can cut it up and just put it in the compost.
So it's reusable and washable.
Yes.
Okay. And we want to avoid the irony of having this nice, reusable, less carcinogenic product and then washing it with a dangerous toxin. We want to avoid that when we can.
Well, we are going to check our dishwashing soap with the database of the Environmental Working Group. So we're going to have the good soap.
Excellent.
And I don't know too much about it because I just learned about it, but I think you wash it with just cool water. And they, well, I'm not sure. People would have to check that out because they said with the beeswax, it's antimicrobes.
I know that honey is a natural antiseptic and antibiotic, so
yeah,
I don't know.
yeah. So,
but the internet does know, so we'll ask the internet.
Yes. So another tip is when you're storing leftovers, you can put it in a bowl and put a plate on top, or store it between two plates. Another item is canned foods. The cans are lined with plastic, and the manufacturers say we've replaced the BPA, and so that makes consumers think everything is great. However, the consumer groups again say that you still should avoid canned foods as much as possible because there may be BPF or BPS used, and they may have similar problems to BPA.
And that does put us into a bit of a catch-22, because isn't the plastic lining there originally to reduce the chance of botulism?
I think it's just to reduce rust.
Okay.
I don't know. So that's something.
But as they say, canned foods are, there are frozen options, there's fresh options. Learning to make beans from dried instead of out of a can is a skill that we should all have anyway, in case the apocalypse comes.
Yeah, and just parents should just be aware of this, and if you eat a lot of canned food, just reduce it. Use frozen, or like you said, the fresh fruits and vegetables. So toys are a problem. You've got kids chewing on toys. So what you should do is look for polypropylene toys. And then if your kid is chewing on toys, get untreated wood or have them chew on a frozen washcloth.
And frozen washcloths help with if they're teething too.
Yeah, if they're that's what I meant, if they're teething. Yeah. You don't want them chewing on the plastic toys because could be made of 4,000 different things that we don't know much about. So next is kids sleepwear, and so what you should look for is a label that says polyester and flame resistant. Tight-fitting cotton sleepwear is okay, and that's because it fits close to the leg, and there's not much oxygen between the garment and the leg. So the problem is flaring out to, get caught in a candle or some open flame. And if you're dressing your kids in loose-fitting t-shirts to avoid these chemicals, then that's another thing that you should be aware of, is that these can flare out and catch on fire.
So you have the two different dangers. One is that there are kids' pajamas that are made of materials that are actually more flammable than a cotton t-shirt, which makes them at more risk. But at the other side, if you get a cotton t-shirt or something less flammable that's flowing, it could get caught on an open flame. I mean, of course, the other solution is to, not use a lot of open flames around your kids until they're old enough to navigate them. But we're also preparing for the emergency for the house fire.
Okay, so other tips, leave your shoes outside. Have a pair of shoes to wear inside. Think of a parking lot with lots of, dripping oil, walking through grass with pesticides. Another tip is use a HEPA filter in your vacuum cleaner. That traps the chemicals and it doesn't just send them out into the air. Also, the recommendation is to clean with a wet towel. It captures the grime. And the interesting thing that people might not be aware of is dust. Dust frequently. And the reason is that there are flame retardants used in computers and appliances and all kinds of things, and they're not stable. They're leaching out into the air of your home. So they find high levels of chemicals in the dust. So vacuum often and dust often. Another recommendation is don't eat processed meat. It's recognized as a carcinogen, and for red meat, it's recognized as a possible carcinogen, and it doesn't have the nitrates added. The chemicals are in the red meat. So Halloween is coming up, and look for toxic-free paints and makeup for your kids.
Yeah, that's actually a pet peeve of mine every October. I'm not sure when viewers are watching this, but we're recording it at the very end of September. But the Halloween dangers that get the most press, stranger abductions and people tampering with candy, basically don't happen. But we have toxins in the paint. We have masks that restrict your vision so you don't see the car coming. We have hypothermia and frostbite are major issues for kids in the northern states because it's cold and we forget them. They go out in little thin costumes with open-toed shoes. And so this is another thing to add to that about making sure that the cosmetics that we use for that one-day makeup application to turn into a ghost or a goblin are just as safe as the ones that you put on every day to go to work.
Yeah, I read your newsletter that you sent out, and that was a good list that you had for Halloween safety.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. Yeah, it's important. This is a part of it.
Okay, next, air pollution. I almost forgot about it. But with wild fires occurring more often, you've got to get a good N95 mask for your kid and check the air quality levels, because and have those masks. We have a lot of masks now due to the pandemic, but get the N95 mask for particulates, because there's a lot of damage that can be caused by air pollution. People don't realize that. The World Health Organization just announced that 7 million early deaths occur worldwide due to air pollution. So we're more aware of it now because wildfires are occurring more and more frequently and lasting longer. So we're more aware of it, but it's really a silent killer.
Yeah. There's a good website, airiq.com, and it exists mostly to get people to buy their app, but you don't have to do that to get a review and even a forecast of air quality by zip code anywhere in North America. And so it's a good thing to do if there are wildfires nearby, or if you're planning a vacation to somewhere and you're not sure about the air quality, and you can get solid information on that and then plan accordingly.
Okay, next, cell phones. I almost forgot to put this in, but my daughter-in-law, someone in her family, just was diagnosed with a brain tumor. And I looked it up, and it's the kind that some researchers talk about being linked to cell phones. So we all know the recommendations about cell phones, and that is, don't sleep with them, use them on speaker. At night, put them in a different room, and don't use them as little as possible, Don't get rid of your landline. And I've heard you say on other programs, other safety programs, don't get rid of your landline. And this is another reason. And so the research, the animal research shows there probably is a link. The human studies, you know, surveying people, how many people used it, how many didn't, the results are mixed.
Yeah.
So
that's one of the difficult things with animal studies versus human studies. Most of our test animals are much smaller than humans. So it requires a smaller amount of any given chemical to impact their body than ours.
yeah, but
so that just gets in the way of things. And it's always good to be safe.
Well, but you know, it's a good indication what the rats and mice tell us. It's a good indication about a lot of things. And then there, you know, the human studies, you ask people, you know, and that's why the results vary with the human studies. You ask people, how many hours did you use a cell phone?
Yeah.
So anyway, the World Health Organization says that the radiation from cell phones is possibly carcinogenic to humans. And the FDA position says there is insufficient evidence to support a causal association between RF radiation exposure and tumor formation. And the FCC and the CDC have similar statements. So, you know, I just be cautious. And I know teens and kids are, you know, delay as long as possible.
Yeah.
You know, giving your kid a cell phone and try to.
There's a lot of other reasons to keep that, to push off that having their own cell phone horizon, for security reasons, for safety reasons, for mental health reasons, above and beyond the risk of cancer. Yeah.
So it's just something that parents should remember. And I think we're going to learn more and more about this through the years, because you know, cell phones are so new. But I just urge parents to be cautious. So next is furniture, and there's a problem with flame retardant in furniture. So the recommendation is to replace your old furniture, carpet, and foam padding with naturally flame retardant materials such as wool, cotton, and hardwood. So most of the other things that we've talked about are easy to do. This is harder, you know, replacing your furniture, but you can replace the cushions. So, and that's less expensive, but you need to do the research to make sure that you're getting the right, you know, the right kind of cushions.
And folks, I'm here to tell you, learning how to make your own furniture is fun. And then you can just make sure you're using just plain old wood, not plywood, but wood without any additives other than what the tree pulled out of the soil. And it's a fun hobby to take on if you're really worried about this.
So
and then
you know
for sure it's all natural.
Do you do that, Jason?
These are all these bookcases back here I built. I built the bed and desk in my youngest's room. It's a hobby I took on about 6-7 years ago, and it's just really fun. And like we say, we get to choose what goes into the pigments and dyes. We get to choose what kind of stain we use. Get to choose the wood and make sure it's non-toxic, and we can avoid a lot of that. I haven't figured out how to make a good cushion yet, but there are natural cushions you can buy at any dimensions.
Yeah. So that's it, Jason.
That's it. It's a long list, a very complicated topic, and as usual, you bring us stuff that a lot of us don't even know to think about. You know, those who haven't seen Rita's other two full-length interviews on the show, I do recommend you check those out. They're about the larger things that we can see with our eyes, like furniture tip overs in the nursery, or seat belts and safety belts in the car. But this kind of background noise, if you will, is, as you said, it's more likely to harm or kill our children than anything but car wrecks and gun violence. So it's worth being vigilant about and making those small changes and taking that little extra effort to make sure that we keep our house as safe as possible.
Yeah, and there's nothing worse than a kid who has cancer.
No, there really isn't.
I went to the Children's Hospital in Tacoma for an event, and it was like, well, this research is important.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you, Rita, so much for coming on again. I really appreciate it. Folks, I'll put links to Rita's book and Rita's website down in the show notes so you can know where to find her. Her blog's got information about consumer protection from the financial side, from the health side. It's got a really popular blog post about raccoons in the backyard, which is inexplicably one of her highest performers. We're not sure why, but it's funny, and I have to tease her about it every time she comes on.
Yeah, how to keep raccoons out of your yard.
And as far as I can tell, the best way to keep a raccoon out of your yard is to convince the raccoon that you want it in your yard, because they are contrary creatures and do not want the best for us. All right. Well, thank you again, Rita, so much. Thanks, everybody, for watching. We'll see you next time. Bye for now. Today's episode was brought to you by our heroes over at Patreon: Todd Elner, Beth Edwards, Douglas Sedevy, Hugh O'Donnell, Art Brick, American Institutes of Kenpo, Beth Pratt, Richard Hubbard, Wayfinder Advantage, Kit Bradley, Lee Douglas, Amy Rivers, Neil Fastine, Kate Carlson, Ron Payton, Jenny Coakley, and Chris Jordan. Join the illustrious heroes by backing us at patreon.com/safestfamily. If you can't, that's okay, but do consider liking us and subscribing here on YouTube or sharing your favorite episodes on social media. Even a little bit on your end can make a lot of difference here. Thank you for watching today. Stay safe. We'll see you next time.